We thank Eva and all of you silent singers for the offertory. Good morning. I'm Reverend Michelle Scott-Huffman. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the minister here at First UU. The poet Rainer Maria Rilke wrote, "I live my life in widening circles that reach out across the world. I may not complete this last one, but I give myself to it. I circle around God, that primordial tower. I've been circling for thousands of years, and I still don't know, am I a falcon, a storm, or a great song?" That particular translation is from Joanna Macy, philosopher of ecology and Buddhist teacher, and the root teacher of The Work That Reconnects. Macy talks about the moment that she discovered the poetry of Rilke and experienced a widening of the circle of herself. She had grown up in a family of Congregationalist pastors and felt drawn to ministry herself. But as a young woman coming into adulthood in the late 1940s, she wasn't quite sure what to do with that. Even so, she pushed on toward the calling that she was feeling. But as she began studies in church history and theology, as she says, there was something that she balked at terrifically, which were creedal arguments about items of belief, and also any hint of exclusivity, that there were people beyond the pale. Feeling deeply disenchanted with Christianity and her theological studies, but still feeling drawn to a life of service, Macy goes on a Fulbright scholarship to the Institute of Political Science in France and studies the French Communist Party. Her education there drew the attention of the CIA, and she would end up working for them in Cold War Europe. While living in Germany in the 1950s, Joanna Macy walked into a bookstore and saw on a table a little cloth-bound book in rag paper. She says, it was exquisite. It was Das Stundenbuch, the book of hours. I picked it up, and the poem that opened was the second poem of the first part. Translated in English, I live my life in widening circles. And something immediately rearranged the furniture of my mind, she says. She goes on to say, as I stood there having an exciting life, but still wishing that I were on a spiritual path, and what was there for me if I couldn't stomach the church fathers in Christianity and the arcane theological arguments? And then I read this. I'll say it in English. I live my life in widening circles that reach out across the world. I may not complete this last one, but I give myself to it. I have been circling around God, that primordial tower. I've been circling for thousands of years, and I still don't know, am I a falcon, a storm, or a great song? The constrictions that my culture had made around the sacred, it just fell away like dried crusts. I felt an excitement about being alive now in a world that itself, yes, of course it was. My world itself was sacred. This month, we're exploring the Soul Matters theme, Widening the Circle. You'll hear some wonderful messages, and I can say that because the ones I'm referring to are not my own. We'll talk about widening the circle in several different ways that encourage deeper engagement with and fuller inclusion of those around us. But today I want to talk about widening the circle of self. There's an organizing principle that says the first revolution is internal. If this is true, then it's possible that any attempts at widening the circle should begin with self. But what does that even mean? The dictionary tells us that the self is a person's essential being that distinguishes them from others, especially considered as the object of introspection or reflexive action. Philosophically, there are those who dismiss the metaphysical concept of the self, like David Hume. But the answer found in the writings of Plato, Kant, and many religious thinkers is that the self is an immortal soul that transcends the physical being. It's been said that the Transcendentalists, as a part of the Romantic movement, honored a turning in upon oneself and a heightened examination of human personality and its moods and mental potentialities. Emerson wrote, "The life of a man is a self-evolving circle, which from a ring imperceptibly small rushes on all sides outwards to new and larger circles, and that without end. And every ultimate fact is only the first in a new series. And life is a series of surprises. And the difference between talents and character is adroitness to keep the old and trodden round, and power and courage to make a new road to new and better goals." Thoreau wrote, "Let me forever go in search of myself, never for a moment think that I have found myself, be a stranger to myself, never a familiar, seeking acquaintance still. And I am convinced, both by faith and experience, that to maintain oneself on this earth is not a hardship, but a pastime." So it would seem that widening the circle of self is at the heart of whatever it is that we're doing when we gather together as a community of practice, working to live into our principles and values as Unitarian Universalists. The Side for Love campaign reminds us that there is much work to be done to realize justice in many areas of our common life. The task of liberation of both ourselves and our neighbor calls us to the kind of outward expansion that doesn't get bogged down in despair that we have not yet arrived, but that honors the truth that we have not yet arrived. And that the crises of our world, both new and old, will always require us to learn more, to practice more fervently, to feel more deeply. And with each internal revolution, the circle of self becomes wider and wider still. So I return to Joanna Macy, who in the 1970s developed the work that reconnects, a framework for widening our circle of self with the clear intention to widen circles of community, circles of care, and circles of justice in the world. This framework was developed out of decades of activism in fair housing, civil rights, and anti-nuclear power protests, all done out of a sense of calling first developed in liberal Christianity and later transformed by Buddhist thought and practice in her own life. I just want to read for you her description of the work that reconnects, as presented in her updated guide entitled Coming Back to Life, co-written with Molly Brown. They write, "Over the years, we have come to see the work that reconnects as occurring in a spiral, mapping a journey through 4 successive stages: coming from gratitude, honoring our pain for the world, seeing with new eyes, and going forth. These 4 stages support one another and work best in sequence. The spiral begins with gratitude because that quiets the mind and brings us back to source, stimulating our empathy and confidence. Expressing our love for life on earth in brief and concrete terms helps us to be more fully present and grounded for acknowledging the pain we carry in our world. In honoring our pain and daring to experience it, we learn the true meaning of compassion, to suffer with. We begin to know the immensity of our heart and mind. What had isolated us in private anguish now opens outward and delivers us into the wider reaches of our collective existence. Sensing the larger life within us lets us see with new eyes. At this turning point of the work, we know more genuinely our relatedness to all that is. We taste our own power to change and feel the texture of our living connections with past and future generations, as well as our sibling species. Then, ever again, we go forth into the actions that call each of us, in keeping with our situation and gifts. We explore the synergistic power available to us as systems apply these understandings to our work for social change. We don't wait for a blueprint or a fail-proof scheme, for each step will bring new perspectives and opportunities. Even when we don't succeed in a given venture, we can be grateful for the chance we took and the lessons we learned. And the spiral begins again. This framework offers us simple but deeply impactful steps for expanding within so that we can then expand outside of ourselves. What if the goal of learning is not to finally have all the answers, but to continue asking better and better questions? What if healing through our pain isn't finally conquering it, but honoring it, accepting it, and integrating its lessons into the person we become moving forward, more compassionate, less afraid, and ready to walk with others through their own pain? The work of widening the circle is happening around us all the time, or at least the opportunities to do the work. But often we come to it empty, bitter, and frustrated because we are doing it in such a way that our circle of self is shrinking instead of expanding. Tending to ourselves with gratitude, love, and compassion will undoubtedly leave us better equipped to do the work the world is calling us to do right now. And if we do it with hearts wide open, we are sure to be surprised at the gifts that show up. Joanna Macy says we must accept our reality in all its immensity. Everything, even the unheard of, must be possible within it. This is, in the end, the only courage required of us, the courage to meet what is strangest and most awesome. May it be so. Blessed be. And amen. The interlude is Everybody In, performed by Peter Mayer. You can join in on the chorus with your device muted.